There is an interesting proverb that states, revenge is a dish best served cold. It means that revenge is much better to be exacted not in the heat of the moment, but to prepare it in advance until the right time comes. In some ways, this may have been the case for Joseph against his brothers who had tried to kill him, but instead they sold him to a slave trader so at least they could profit from their actions. Joseph, being a favorite of his father, did not bode well to his 11 other brothers. As a result, they sold him off to slavery in Egypt. When Joseph was working for a powerful Egyptian, he had to suffer through sexual harassment on a daily basis. When he finally stood up to her, it was Joseph who was blamed for making advances on the wife, and he got thrown into jail. It must really have seemed as though life was caving in on him, without any hope, while serving time in a foreign jail. Yet, it is from here that his skills in dream interpretation helped to solve Pharaoh's dreams. Joseph saw in Pharaoh's dreams that Egypt will have 7 years of feast and then 7 years of famine. When Joseph solved the dream, he was the given of doing strategic economic planning for all of Egypt. The 7 years of famine not only affected Egypt, but also devastated Palestine, where his father and his brothers were living. So when the famine hit, they came to Egypt to buy grain, not knowing that their brother Joseph was in charge. Joseph gave his brothers the food they asked for. As Andrew Lloyd Webber's Joseph sings, I'm going to take them all for a ride. After all, they had tried fratricide. So he hides money in all their bags of grain and silver cup in Benjamin's, and then accuses them of being thieves, and the brothers would be accessory to crime. So this was a golden opportunity to avenge for what the brothers had done to him years ago. It was the time to let them appreciate all the suffering he himself went through with the betrayal, the Egyptian jail, the pain, loneliness, dejection, and suffering. Yet, rather than seizing on a glorious opportunity for revenge, Joseph instead chose to forgive and reconcile with his murderous brothers. Joseph chose to forgive, even though it would have benefited him politically. In a place like Imperial Egypt, strength and power were prized. A display of revenge would have boosted Joseph's profile as a man to be feared and respected. Yet for Joseph, rather than playing into the hands of the popular culture, he chose God's way of forgiveness and reconciliation. Joseph chose forgiveness for three reasons. The first was practical. Joseph forgave because if he did not, then he would have no family in Egypt. He would be all alone and he would be lonely for the rest of his life. So it was in his best interest to forgive, as it is best interest to forgive ourselves. I remember reading an article about forgiveness in the New York Times, and one of the readers posted a comment. He was a retired doctor who simply would not or could not forgive anyone who had ever wronged him. The consequence was that his wife divorced him, his children would not speak to him, he had banished all of his friends as well. None of us are perfect, and we all make mistakes in our relationships, and this man simply could not forgive anyone. So he had banished everyone from his life, and he is now resigned to a life of complete aloneness and loneliness. Now he realized how foolish he had been. Life really is tragic if we choose not to forgive. Secondly, Joseph forgave because of emotional reasons. Even if he was going to serve revenge to his brothers, he simply could not do it. His heart was filled with too much emotion. True love came out. He could not contain his tears. There was a force much more powerful than his need to exact justice with revenge and enjoy teaching them the lesson they would never forget. And that force is the power of love. Thirdly, Joseph forgave because of theological reasons. Joseph realized that God was the true author of his life. As he said, God sent me before you to preserve life. He was reassuring the brothers, it was not you, but God sent me here to Egypt. The pattern repeats. God made me a father to Pharaoh, and God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Joseph not only reassures his guilt-stricken brothers, but also all of us, the hearers of his story, that the whole point of his life, behind all the events of his incredible biography, is that God was actually at work to bring good out of evil. Essentially, Joseph could no longer hate his brothers and do them harm. When we reflect on the story of Joseph, it is somewhat difficult for us to believe that God was behind the murderous plot of his brothers, the slave trade, the sexual harassment, the false accusation, and the time in jail. Is God also the author of our most tragic and difficult moments of our lives? The way I see it, suffering is very much a part of life. God does not cause suffering, but it is God who opens new doors, who gives us strength to walk through them, and helps us to make something good out of our suffering. What Joseph's story is saying to us is that in spite of awful tragedies, the ruler of the universe is a caring friend. When hardships come to us, the scripture is saying to us, do not panic, nor think that the world will come to an end or that God has abandoned us. Something much better, much greater awaits us when the storm of life passes over us. With a deep faith in God, we can be patient and we can trust that all things will work out in the end, not according to our desires, but according to God's plans for us, which can be far better than what we can imagine for ourselves. Ultimately, God will help us to overcome our suffering, give us courage in the midst of fear, and turn despair into hope. With such trust, we can enjoy each moment of life for what it is, as a profound gift of life, to honor, to reconcile with one another, and to love one another. Thanks be to God.